What if the most dangerous place in the world wasn't a dark alley or a stranger's car, but your own family's dinner table? Picture it, a regular Tuesday night. A little boy sits there, silent. He has learned that his voice is a switch that flips the room's atmosphere from warm to freezing. He a master of moving peas around his plate, a tiny magician hoping his next trick is to simply disappear. He watches his sister get a smile for a story about school. He hears his brother get praise for a good grade, but when he tries to speak, the air tightens. His words aren't heard as simple mistakes, they land like offenses. In his own home, surrounded by his own family, he feels like an intruder. For so many of you watching this, that isn't a scene from a movie, it is a memory. This is the silent, high definition broadcast of being the unwanted child. It is not always a life of screaming matches or dramatic punishments. In fact, that would be easier. No, this is a haunting created by what didn't happen. It is in the quiet sighs when you enter a room, the way eyes seem to look straight through you. It is the unmistakable feeling that your very presence is a disruption, not a joy. Look, every human soul is coded from birth for one thing: belonging. We arrive fragile, open, and hungry for connection. When that connection is either blocked or worse, replaced with a subtle, icy resentment, something devastating happens to a child's mind. You don't just feel unloved, you start to believe you are unworthy of love. That one word difference is everything. Being unloved is a condition. It's a temporary state of circumstance, like being wet in the rain. But feeling unworthy, that becomes your identity. It's not something happening to you, it's something you believe you are. It's a piece of software installed directly into the operating system of your soul, programmed to run on a loop for the rest of your life. The pioneer of attachment theory, John Bowlby, nailed this decades ago. He showed that our first bonds are the blueprint for every relationship we will ever have. When those bonds are warm and secure, you grow into the world with an invisible shield of confidence. But when they are cold, hostile, or just absent, you internalize it. You don't just carry the wound, you become the wound, carrying that rejection into every job interview, every first date, every late-night moment of self-doubt. And here's the most exquisitely cruel part of the trap. As a child, you never realized it was happening. Because to you, your parents weren't just people. They were your A to Z reality. They were the architects of your entire universe. So, if the architects of your universe showed you disdain, your tiny brain didn't think, "Wow, my architect is really terrible at their job." No, in a genius act of self-preservation designed to protect that vital bond, you thought, "The building must be the problem. I must be flawed." All that pain got reframed as self-blame. A parent's rejection became your identity. This is the origin story for that quiet, nagging voice so many adults live with every single day. The one whispering, "Am I good enough? Do I even deserve to be loved? Why does true connection always feel like a party I wasn't invited to?" Then there is the poison of comparison. When love is a scarce resource in a household, you become an expert economist of affection. You notice. You track every smile, every compliment, every soft touch given to a sibling, logging it as evidence in the case against yourself. It isn't always a glaring difference. It's subtler, it is less eye contact. It's a shorter fuse for your mistakes. It's a quieter celebration for your victories. But your nervous system, a detective on high alert, doesn't miss a single clue. This environment trains you, like an animal, to expect rejection everywhere. A tiny criticism from your boss, a friend who seems distant for a day, a partner in a bad mood. All of these aren't just small bumps in the road. In your nervous system, they are colossal, flashing signs proving what you've suspected all along. You are not wanted here. Science confirms this isn't just in your head. Developmental psychology studies show that kids who face parental rejection have measurably lower self-esteem and higher levels of anxiety and depression. But it goes deeper. That early rejection fundamentally reshapes how your brain physically processes social cues. In other words, you grow into an adult who is hardwired to see rejection, even when it isn't there. The lens of your childhood permanently colors the vision of your adulthood. Now, from this painful start, something fascinating emerges. Sidelined from the game of love, You develop what psychologists call compensatory strategies. You try to earn what wasn't freely given. Maybe you became the perfectionist. You thought that if you could just be flawless, get perfect grades, have the perfect career, be the perfect partner, you would finally be undeniable. They would have to love you then. Or maybe you became the people pleaser. You became a chameleon, expertly molding yourself into whatever shape you thought would finally win approval. Your own needs, your own identity, were packed away in a suitcase you forgot you were even carrying. Or maybe you went the other way. You became the rebel. You built a fortress of defiance with one core directive: push everyone away before they have a chance to push you first. Perfectionism, compliance, rebellion. These are not and never were your identity. They are masks. They are brilliant, life-saving survival mechanisms forged in the fire of rejection. But after a while, you forget you're wearing them. You confuse the mask with your own face, living for decades under the weight of a role you never, ever chose. Why does blowing the dust off this old story even matter? Because silence is gasoline for repetition. Wounds you don't talk about don't disappear. They metastasize. They hide in the shadows of your subconscious, and from there, they steer your life. The once unwanted child unconsciously seeks out partners who feel like home, even if home was a battlefield. You find yourself drawn again and again to people who are emotionally withholding, critical, or dismissive, because the chaos of an insecure connection feels more familiar, and therefore safer than the terrifying vulnerability of peace. Your brain isn't seeking happiness, it is seeking what it knows. This is how the blueprint becomes a dynasty. Generational trauma isn't a mystical curse. It is just an unhealed pattern, echoing forward in time. Let's get clinical for a second, right down to the biology. When your child self felt rejected, your nervous system screamed. Threat. Stress hormones like cortisol flooded your body. This wasn't a once-in-a-while thing, it was your daily weather report over time. This chronic stress literally re-sculpted your brain. Neuroscience shows us that childhood rejection is linked to a permanently overactive amygdala, your brain's fire alarm, and a weakened prefrontal cortex, the part that is supposed to calm the alarm down. What does that feel like in your life, right now, as an adult? It feels like being jumpy. It's being hyper, alert, constantly scanning faces and emails for the slightest hint of disapproval. It is wildly overreacting to a small mistake because your ancient fire alarm is screaming, 5, alarm fire, when it's just a burnt piece of toast. It means stillness feels foreign, and a low level of chaos feels normal. And here is the beautiful, devastating paradox. Through it all, you developed a superpower. You became remarkably, almost psychically, sensitive to the emotions of others. You can walk into a room and feel the mood before a single word is spoken. This isn't magic, it is survival, when your physical and emotional safety depended on your ability to predict the next wave of rejection. You learned to become a grandmaster of perception. The tragedy most people miss is that this doesn't only happen in obviously abusive homes. Sometimes the unwanted child grows up in a family that looks perfect from the outside. There are birthday parties, family vacations, maybe even laughter. But internally, you felt invisible, wrong, and perpetually out of step. This invisible hurt can be even crazier making than open hostility, because you have no evidence for your pain. There is no bruise to point to, so you doubt yourself. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am just too sensitive. This self-gaslighting becomes a lifelong habit. Fast forward, the hated child is now 30, 40, or 50. You might not use that label, you might have long forgotten, but the program is still running. It shows up in your relationships, a crippling fear of abandonment, a profound difficulty with trust, an almost magnetic pull towards people who will never be fully available. It shows up in your career, a grinding need to overwork, a constant imposter syndrome that sabotages your successes, a deep-seated doubt in your worth, no matter how many achievements you stack up. And most of it all, it shows up in your self-talk. That inner critic that is relentlessly harsh, unforgiving, and sounds suspiciously like the echoes of voices you grew up with. This is why healing isn't about just moving on or erasing your past. That's impossible. Healing is about turning around, walking back into the code, and understanding the program. Seeing the pattern clearly is the only way you can ever hope to break it. And this brings us to the revolution, the quiet, profound, and life-changing act of reparenting. Reparenting means giving to yourself, now, as an adult, the care, compassion, and acceptance you never received as a child. It sounds like a flimsy therapy concept, but it is the most concrete and radical act of self-liberation you will ever undertake. It means stopping, in a moment of anxiety and self-criticism, and telling yourself, you are worthy, you are lovable, you belong. Words you may have never heard, but words your nervous system has been starving for. Just naming your experience is a power move. To finally be able to say, I grew up feeling like the unwanted one, moves it from a place of vague, personal shame. Something is wrong with me, to an objective wound with a cause, and a wound with a cause can be treated. Remember those attachment blueprints? Here's the single most important piece of news. They are not fixed. Your brain wiring is not permanent. Through intentional, safe relationships, with a good therapist, with trusted friends, with a loving partner, you can build what scientists call earned secure attachment. This means that even if you started life where love felt like a lie, you can actively relearn it. Your nervous system can be compassionately rewired. Your brain can forge new pathways. Science is finally proving what the human heart has always hoped for. It is never too late to feel safe in the world, but this requires a new weapon, one that might feel completely foreign to you: self-compassion. Researcher Dr. Kristin Neff proved that treating yourself with kindness, not criticism, in moments of failure or pain, measurably reduces anxiety and melts shame. For the child who learned that love was conditional, being kind to yourself can feel unnatural. Criticism feels like home. Harshness feels productive, but to practice self-compassion is the ultimate rebellion. It is to stand up and declare, I will not continue the cycle. I will not treat myself the way I was treated. Each small act of gentleness, resting when you are tired, forgiving yourself for a mistake, speaking kindly to the person in the mirror, is an act of defiance against the old program. And that superpower you developed, that incredible sensitivity, once you begin to heal, it transforms. What was once a survival tool becomes a genuine gift. Your empathy becomes a bridge to others. Your intuition becomes a guide. Your depth of understanding allows you to connect with people on a level that others can only dream of. The unwanted child is not doomed to be broken. You are invited to alchemize. Turn your rejection into insight, your silence into art, your pain into profound connection. So, where do you begin the rebellion? First, awareness. Get a journal, write it out. Not to blame, but to see. The memories of feeling unwanted, the subtle stings, the moments of invisibility. Then, below those memories, write the objective truth. It wasn't my fault. I was worthy of love then, and I am worthy of love now. Second, seek safe relationships. Find a therapist, a support group, or friends who offer consistent, non-judgmental acceptance. These relationships are the training ground for your nervous system to learn a new language, the language of safety. Third, boundaries. If those old family dynamics still wound you, you do not have to endure them endlessly. Healing does not require repeated exposure to your original injury. A boundary is not an act of aggression. It is an act of profound self-respect. Fourth, self-expression. The opposite of being erased is to create, paint, write, sing, build. Turn the silent ache into something visible. Every act of creation is a declaration. I am here. I matter. And finally, compassion. Practice it daily, hourly, if you must. When you make a mistake, ask yourself, what would I say to a dear friend in this exact situation? Then, say that to yourself. This single shift is enough to rewrite your entire identity over time. Let's go back to that little kid at the dinner table, feeling invisible, staring at their plate. Maybe that child is still sitting inside you, waiting to be seen. The invitation, right now, is to turn your attention inward. Look at them, see them in all their quiet pain and desperate hope, and tell that child everything they have always needed to hear. You are not a problem. You are not too much. It was never your fault. You are worthy. You are enough. you belong. Because real healing begins the moment the unwanted child is finally, truly met with unconditional love. Not a borrowed love, not a love you have to earn, but a love that says simply, you exist, therefore you matter. Perhaps that is the deepest truth. The identity of the hated child was a story you were told, a role you were assigned in someone else's broken play. But you are the author of your life now, and you can choose a different ending. You can choose to belong first, and finally, to yourself. And from that place, you can build a world where you are not just welcome, but celebrated. Your story is not over. It is just beginning.